here are just a couple of thoughts on the Damar Hamlin situation and how we feel about it and how we're processing all of this. Welcome back to another episode of Caps Off. Today we're going to do something a little differently than obviously normal. What happened last night in the Bengals-Buffalo game is unprecedented, sad, a travesty. And so Felipe and I, Jack was at the game in Cincinnati. Yeah. So he's traveling back right now, and I know he'll have some words at a later episode this week. And Matan is currently out right now. So myself and Felipe, we had a couple thoughts on whether or not we even do an episode. It doesn't even feel right. But we feel as fans of the sport, as members of the media, to be able to have a platform where people do listen, to kind of share our thoughts and talk through it. There's no blueprint for discussing this, but it's a really scary situation, and, prayers, thoughts, and everything in between goes out to Damar Hamlin, his family. So Felipe and myself are just going to kind of talk through it and see where that goes. But Felipe, I'm kind of curious to know your thoughts, your initial thoughts really on the situation.
Yeah, like you said, it's unprecedented, man. It's not something you expect to see. And I think part of the game that we've gotten used to and watching is these unexpected injuries. And some of them are bad. What we've seen with Tua this year, it's there's been some scary stuff. Yeah. And a lot of that stuff is you swallow it because it's part of the game. And you want to try to avoid it. But something like this, you can't avoid. You cannot avoid. I was watching CNN and one of the most renowned doctors, Sanjay Gupta, was talking about how this particular injury, I forgot the exact term for what.
It's like comodiocosis or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. That happens to him. Happens 12 times a year typically in the world. This doesn't happen. And it's more likely to happen in a sport like baseball than football because it's typically a smaller object hitting the chest right around where the heart is at the exact time of the heartbeat in which it's beating. So it is very, very, very rare. It's not supposed to happen. So rather than, I think it's important that we take a step back and look at the bigger picture and kind of look at the scope of this thing as a absolute freak injury that is obviously a really bad thing that happened, a tragedy there. Hopefully he's going to be okay. But let's also understand that rather than I think we have a tendency to and understandably to try to find a perpetrator of this, in this case football as a sport, as being unsafe, in the NFL not handling safety in the right way. This is an absolute freak injury, and I think we should address the NFL only giving them 5 minutes to come back on the field. I think that's a completely different story. But in the case of the injury itself, it's just
it's terrible,
something horrible that shouldn't happen, but it a coincidence and ended up in something catastrophic, obviously, but hopefully not the worst that could happen. Hopefully he's okay. I know he's they're taking care of him right now, and his everything is working. What's the state?
Well, I think the update as of 10:17 a.m. Tuesday morning is that he is obviously, his vitals were okay, but that he's in a medically induced coma, I believe. That he was intubated. I don't want us to speculate across anything rather than just reacting to what we know, to what we saw. So I'd prefer to kind of stay away from that and hoping that he is okay, and thoughts and prayers. But you kind of mentioned the bigger picture at play here. And I think the bigger picture at play here is we fail to remember that these guys at the end of the day are human beings. They are just like you and I. And I myself, yourself, Jack, Felipe, Jack, Matan, we as media members always dehumanize these guys as individuals who may not get us that next fantasy point, or may not be a top X player, and talk down on them for these, for various reasons. And we are just as much at fault as anyone else. But we all lose sight of what really is important. And what's really important is that this is someone's brother. This is someone's husband, son. This is a member of the community, someone who always does great work, as he has his toy drive right now. And so we lose sight of who athletes are as human beings. We lose sight that they have emotions. And so as us, as members of the media, where we like to talk shit and talk down on them, and I myself and yourself, like we fail to remember this. And that, I think, is the part that I'm really grasping with the most, outside of hoping for his safety, is that these are human beings and that we get mad at them for plays. I think Ryan Clark spoke so beautifully on last night, talking about, these guys with the CBA. Dominique Foxworth said the same thing. Like, they fight to get extra money, whether you are a superstar or not, to have player safety and health at the forefront of everyone's minds. And I just think that what bothers me the most is that even on social media and internet culture, we've been able to, like you said, have a perpetrator and point fingers at someone, when in actuality what we should be doing, and the only thing that we should be doing, is thoughts and prayers, regardless of it being a violent sport, regardless if it could happen in baseball, to know that, that is by far one of the worst things I've ever seen on a football field. And just to send, a lot of love. For me, even as I'm trying to speak on it, I don't know how to wrap my head around it. I don't know what the right words are to say. I said to you earlier, there's not a blueprint of how to handle this situation. But I so much as commend those in the media, those on ESPN, those on,
that was tough to handle,
across the entire internet stratosphere, how they handled it with grace. I commend Bengals fans, Bills fans. They handled it very graciously. The, healthcare workers, medical professionals, those that pretty much, if he is to survive, they can be credited. They, for them to rush on the field, like, they are the real heroes here. So it's just, there's a lot emotionally going through my mind. Yeah. I'll kind of hand it off to you, but there's a lot definitely. It's really,
I think that's what makes it tough. It's the influx of emotions, right? Because, a lot of us are watching as fans. And that's tough. I think there's almost a sense of guilt too. And like I said, like, we always want to find a perpetrator. Like, we always want to be able to blame somebody, and it's easy to blame the game of football. And then by doing that, which is a natural reaction, we almost feel guilty for supporting this, right? And then I think there's another part of it. As a former player, I played this. I put a helmet on when I was like 9, and I remember when we were taught to play football, we taught to tackle. You have screws that screw on the face mask on the helmet. We were taught to put I'm supposed to put my screws and your screws tackling you, and obviously head to head, you're not allowed to do that anymore. But that's how we were taught. And there was, as bad as it sounds, there's validation in knocking somebody out the game. There was validation in that. So it's just part of the game. So I think there's guilt as a fan, and as also like a player, and understanding that, like, this is obviously we don't want to go ever too far in an injury. But it's the nature of the game. And that's what the NFL has been trying to grasp, like, the past, decade and more, with just player safety, whether it's with the head, whether it's with the knees. Obviously, you can't go too low on a quarterback. You can't go too high on a quarterback. It's making it hard to play the game, but it's just something we have to grapple with. There's no answer, and that's why it's tough, because there's no answer. But we have to deal with, the player safety is obviously a huge thing. But I think stripping away all of that, it's like you said, forget the type of injury that happened, forget player safety. The whole focus is on
Damar
Hamlin. Yeah,
Damar Hamlin.
And that is where everything is at right now, because this happened to him. It's unlikely that it would have happened, that it could have happened, especially on a game that was televised on national TV, and everybody has their eyes on. That makes it that much harder. In a game that everyone was so excited about because it was a very explosive game, just in terms of the potency of the teams that were playing against each other. So look at that in a vacuum, and I think, yeah, thoughts and prayers to Hamlin and his family there. Like you mentioned, the toy drive is awesome. I think the way that the community and just the fan base of the NFL as a whole, as you mentioned, there's 32 teams, there's 32 fan bases, but
we were one
last
team.
night we were one team. Where it was one fan base. We all are rooting for him for the game to make sure that like everything is okay. And we were able to see that with the toy drive. That I think the goal was like $2,500. His
We're
goal
over $3 million.
over $3 million overnight. Right now it's at around $3 million, and I'm sure it's going to keep going up. So it's been great to see the reaction, just the kind of coming together of everyone, because like you say, you know, we have a tendency to dehumanize. And I don't even want to necessarily like. I think even dehumanizing is maybe it could be taken the wrong way. But looking at these players as like, what do they give us? What do they bring us? And if we're playing fantasy, it's like we care about the fantasy points. If they're a player on our team that we root for, then like, you know, play well for me. If you don't play well, it's like, oh, this guy sucks. And it's part of it's part of being a professional athlete, and it's what you live up to. But in times where something like this happens, to be able to embrace, you know, an athlete and a scenario, a situation like this that happens that is very traumatic. I think there's beauty in it, and the toy drive shows it all. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think touching on what you said a little bit, you know, as fantasy players, as fans of the sport, you know, we get so upset, but we fail to remember these are human beings first, that they have emotions just like you and I, that they have siblings and want to go to sleep peacefully and wake up not too tired. Like they are just like you and me, regardless of color, regardless of race, religion, any of these things. And, you know, I think as members of the media, but really members of the fan bases, what troubles me the most in internet culture is that through it all, we are still going to have people that are insensitive. We are still going to have people that decide to say, you know, and like it happened in our Discord, you know, was he even a good player? And it's like, that doesn't fucking matter. If that's what you choose to look at, you are part of the problem, not only as a fan, but as a society. And as a society, what you're kind of also saying is like, we do have an ability to propel people and to come together and prop one another up. But instead, we look at so many times of these players to tear them down and to bring them down to a level that, like we've said, dehumanizes them, regardless of if they're an athlete or a celebrity. They are people. And we fail to remember that. And it's unfortunate and sad that in moments of this, where it is matters of life or death, that's when we must be remembered. And we, as a collective, as a community of NFL fans, and just people in general, we need to do a better job of holding one another accountable and not tearing people down and propelling people up. Because we're seeing right now what we can do, that at least the small good, the small silver lining in a terribly horrific injury, that we can support people. We're seeing it. So when it comes to Damar Hamlin, I hate the fact that it comes to this point where something tragic, needs to happen in order to do this. But I'm overwhelmed with emotions. I'm overwhelmed with thinking about his mother. I'm sure whether or not he has siblings, whether he has a wife or a girlfriend, those that are closest to him, agent, marketing rep, teammates. You know, I feel for them. I send thoughts and prayers, and it's like we've said, I don't know that there are no words to really encapsulate the emotion and or to make it better.
And you talk about Damar's family, and how tough that is, and the people very close to him, his mother that was at the game, and they waited for her to be able to get in the ambulance and stuff. But there's a certain type of mental strength and adversity itself. Obviously, all the players that were there were in shock, right? And that was really tough to see. This is to see Stephon Diggs crying and Josh Allen like in complete disbelief. But T. Higgins is another one you really got to think about because
Totally.
he was actively involved in that. And to think that, and obviously he played no active part in this, but he was, and I mean that willingly, but he was in the action when it happened. And any thought that, you could have been a part of that is so tough for T. Higgins. And so, obviously thoughts and prayers to everybody, but T. Higgins as well, being at the forefront of something like that could have happened, and that he's just playing football, man. He's making a catch. Like it's tough to think you're that close to something that could happen. Everybody was that close, but T. Higgins especially. So that's tough. I saw him embrace his mom walking out of the game, and again, silver lining, like you said. I mean, I think it's just to see the beauty and everybody kind of coming together. And that's what it is. And look, this isn't a one-time thing where we're seeing people come together. I think it's seeing the whole community as fans, yes. But after games, there's prayer circles after every game. These players, they're family at the end of the day, right? Not just players, but coaches. There's a reason they're exchanging jerseys afterwards. They're hugging each other. They're friends in the offseason. They're hanging out. So it's a community that you've heard it be called a fraternity, a family. Even you're just able to see it on full display now, especially after something like this happens, and it's important to be able to separate separate the fun that we're able to have as fans from understanding like the reality of the fact that these are grown men and a lot of times very young men who are still developing even, that are doing this for a living and are having fun doing it and building a community doing it. So I don't think that as a fan, you keep yourself from, being a fan of your team and rooting against another team and hoping another player fumbles. Like that's part of the game, but you just be able to separate that from, any type of, like you say, dehumanizing a player and thinking like in a person and all he stands for and all he is a football player. Now, these guys are a lot more than that.
Totally.
We just know them as football players in a lot of cases. So I think on that same level, it's important for us to recognize that they are dealing with a lot more than a lot of people give them credit for, and a lot more than we can see. As athletes, we have a tendency to think that, and I mean, as watching athletes, we have a tendency to think that athletes are like stronger than everybody else, and they're better in whatever sense that may be. They're all dealing with stuff, man. I was watching a Dak Prescott interview the other day, and actually after the Thursday night football game when the Cowboys beat Tennessee, and he has like his arm sleeve, and he has like faith and different words written, and he had one that said like, I don't want to like missay it, but it was something about like, don't be afraid to like get help and like talk.
Yeah.
Obviously, he lost his brother to suicide. There have been other players in the league that have lost their brother to suicide, and that is the mental fortitude to be able to deal with that and be at the top of whatever profession you're doing, where everybody's looking at you. There's guys on TV calling you ass. I've called players ass. To be able
Me
to,
as well.
To be able
we
to
all have.
to be able to deal with stuff like that, it's really tough. So I think it's important for us to be able to shine a light on just the strength that, again, like you said, these are human beings, man.
You raise a great point, and that's talking about mental health. I think, and Jack, he's not here today, but wanted to talk a little bit about it. But I think we'd be doing a disservice if we didn't talk about it a little bit. I myself is someone that's been diagnosed with anxiety and depression, someone that's very much dealt with it and I think where we as a collective community of people can come together and resonate with one another is the fact that we do share these same emotions. We do process logic, fear, sadness, happiness, all in the same vein. And we minimize the mental health that these athletes specifically may deal with. Because, like you said, calling them terrible, calling them trash, or any of these things, talking down upon them, where we only view them as an athlete, whereas there's so much more than that, has got to be incredibly difficult to be able to process. Mm-hmm. And that goes for athletes. This goes for people. This goes for you and me, that if you are struggling, if you do feel sad or do feel that you are alone, that someone out there does care about you. We care about you. So there is room for help for everyone. And that's a big part of today's not only game, but society that we fail to appreciate enough, is that mental health is real. Mm-hmm. And as you shared that Dak interview and story, and like you mentioned, his brother, the same will go for Damar's family, the entire NFL community, fans, players, teammates, all the above. So I think my message to anyone that could be watching this is that you are loved, you are thought about and cared about, and that there is always someone you can talk to, no matter how many walls feel like they're closing in on you, that eventually those walls do expand and there's light at the end of the tunnel, no matter what. And I think as we begin to wrap up just this conversation, my thoughts and prayers go out to the Hamlin family, go out to Damar, teammates. As we opened it up, we talked about this being unprecedented and just incredibly tragic. And, I think... I like I said, I don't think there's a blueprint to deal with this. I commend those in the community that have been able to handle this with grace, with thoughtfulness, and with love. And we just hope that, he is going to be okay. And I'll give you if you have any last thoughts on it.
Yeah, I just want to say this. I mean, it's a beautiful game that we love. We all watch. We have a show specifically around it, right? Yeah. And there's so much, and it's such a big business, and not to make this a business, but it's such a huge thing because we all love it. We love it as human beings. We start playing when we're 5, we start playing flag football when we're 5, 6, put pads on when we're 7, 8. Communities live around this, thrive around this.
Communities are built on it.
They're built on it, dude. I grew up in Texas, in the Dallas area, where like what you do on Friday, it's weekends, right? Friday nights are football games. Yeah. You go to your local high school football game. Saturday watch college football. Sunday you go to church and then watch NFL. Like it doesn't change. Like that's what it is. And so we love this game, and all ages, all demographics. It's why it's the most watched sport in this country. It's why the Super Bowl is so big. It's why college football is so big. So let's use this opportunity as a way to not only continue to embrace the beauties of our game, and realize that like the reason that we are able to bring so much support for somebody like Damar Hamlin is because we are all appreciators of this. The reason we're able to bring his toy drive from the goal of 2,500 to 3 million. Appreciate what football is able to do to bring us together, and then also let's continue to take steps to just make the game safer. I know I said earlier that this was a freak injury, and it was. That doesn't take away from the fact that there has been other scary moments this season. It's important to adjust that and to be able to improve any mechanisms that we can to continue to make it safer, to continue to make this a family game, a game that kids grow up wanting to watch, to play, to commentate. I know there's a lot of people out there that just want to talk about sports for a living, and that's so much fun. We get to do that, and we love it. And without this game, we're not able to do that. So let's continue to, bring together the community, improve the the safety just around the game itself, and make sure that the same way we're able to rejoicing and gather around Damar Hamlin and his family in a time like this is something that we're going to be able to continue to do going forward, not just around major things and happenings like this, but also in different moments that are needed, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's just one message I wanted to give out.
Yeah, well said. I think if there's a message that I want to leave anyone with, it's that we as human beings, we choose to amplify and explore many of the differences we have. But when you look at the differences, there's far more similarities and commonalities amongst one another. And in a time where we so much as use internet culture as a driving force in what we do, we as a society and as human beings need to do a better job supporting one another, propelling one another, whether that means, complimenting others or coming to someone's defense. But this world that we live in that is filled with such toxicity, harassment, racist remarks, homophobic slurs, and everything in between is incredibly detrimental to the mental health of individuals, athletes of the game, and we as human beings. And, I just hope that as we wrap this up, we could learn something from this in terms of being there for others. And the way that the NFL community was there for one another is something that I will remember for the rest of my life. And, my thoughts and prayers go out. Our thoughts and prayers go out to Damar Hamlin, his family, his teammates, and the entire NFL community. And, I think what's best for us is that we're not going to obviously have anything for the rest of the week and just allow some space to occur. But, our thoughts and prayers are with you, Damar. And appreciate everyone's time.
So love. Thanks for listening.